I'm Graeme Perry, a solicitor and tax expert with SykesAnderson solicitors in London, and I'm going to be talking about the new tax charges which apply to companies owning residential property in the UK worth £2 million and above. So these are examples of some of the questions that we've been hearing from clients and from contacts regarding these new charges. I've heard about de-enveloping. What is this? So this is something which people are having to do to avoid new UK tax charges relating to residential property. What are these tax charges? People who own a residential property valued at over £2 million in the name of a company may have to pay an annual tax starting at £15,000 and going up to £140,000, depending on the value of the property. They will also pay capital gains tax on the sale of the property at 28% on any increase in value from 5th of April 2013 onwards. What has brought about these charges? The UK government has taken the view that high-value properties are being held in such structures in order to allow disposals to take place via share sales. These are outside the scope of UK stamp duty land tax. To counter this, new measures were introduced in the 2012 budget. After a few tweaks during 2012, these changes have now taken effect. Does this cover all properties? Well, it's important to bear in mind that these taxes apply only to residential property. So commercial property and farms, for example, could still be acquired in a company without suffering these new charges. There are also reliefs that apply in certain circumstances, such as residential properties which are purchased for redevelopment or for buy-to-let purposes. Is it all companies that are caught? Yes, these charges affect UK and offshore companies. So if my London property is owned by a BVI company with the shares owned by me, would I be caught? Yes, if the property does not fall within one of the exemptions. Does it help if the shares are owned by a trust? No, not by itself. You would still be caught as ownership of the property remains with the company. This is a classic structure which has been used very effectively by non-UK domiciled people for years. The annual charge and the capital gains tax charge mean that this structure's days look numbered. Is there any chance of going under the radar of the UK revenue? In our view, this is unlikely. For recently purchased property, a stamp duty return would have to have been lodged at the time of the purchase. This would have shown the price paid for the property and the details of the buyer. The revenue will have this on record. With other cases, it will still be easy for the revenue to obtain the title documents of properties in notoriously high value areas. These will show the identity of the owner, and we have seen the revenue sending letters to company directors telling them that they are expecting a return to be lodged. If you simply don't declare for the annual charge, then you're likely to end up with a mortgage being registered against the property. So how do I know the value of the property? Now this is to be self-assessed, so it is really for the company directors to decide, but it is sensible to have a valuation from an estate agent as evidence of the value. The key date for valuing the property is 1st of April 2012. This value then applies for all annual charges until 2017. What are people doing about this? Well, this is the de-enveloping you have heard of. In practice, what is required is the transfer of beneficial ownership of the property out of the company structure. Is this easy to do? It really depends on the precise facts of your structure. In some cases, the transfer out of the structure will trigger a substantial charge to stamp duty land tax, which will be prohibitive. In other cases, it should be simple to structure the transfer without incurring any stamp duty. Careful consideration will be required in all cases. Now, are there any downsides to de-enveloping? Potentially yes, there may be. The classic structure used to date has been very efficient for UK inheritance tax purposes. Non-domiciles have been able to remain outside UK inheritance tax by using company ownership. De-enveloping will generally require personal or trust ownership, both of which result in an exposure to inheritance tax, even for non-doms. What is the potential exposure? With personal ownership, there is a risk of a 40% inheritance tax charge on death. With trust ownership, the risk is a charge of 6% of the property value on every 10th anniversary of the trust. Both of these charges are based on the equity in the property. Is there any way around this? Well, up to now, inheritance tax has been managed by way of lending, which reduces the equity in the property. Further new rules are seeking to clamp down on creative lending structures. These new rules are complex, and it is not clear to what extent they will come into force. Our view is that it is still possible to achieve a tax-efficient structure, although this is likely to require some additional steps. If these steps can be taken, the savings will be high when compared to the annual charge and the capital gains tax. In many scenarios, the total tax paid if you do nothing will be 10 times what will be due if you de-envelope. If I have a mortgage over my property already, will this pose problems? It may be necessary to implement some additional steps in order to avoid a high stamp duty charge when de-enveloping. Your bank will need to be agreeable to any restructuring, and they may need to be flexible in terms of their security arrangements. Are there any other factors to bear in mind? Certainly, you will want to consider confidentiality. Details of property owners can be readily accessed in the UK Land Registry. This has been a big driver in people using companies, as it adds a shield of confidentiality, particularly when the company is based outside the UK. You also need to consider whether you are UK tax residents or not, as this will have an impact on what the most tax-efficient structure is for you. There is a new UK residency test from April 2013, and you need to consider this carefully, as it will catch out a lot of people who spend time in the UK and have a home here. You must have your position looked at carefully before deciding whether de-enveloping is the best option and what structure is preferable for you. If you would like more details on de-enveloping or restructuring, you can contact me at SykesAnderson. The telephone number is 0203 178 3770, and my email address is graeme.perry@sykesAnderson.com. Further details can be found on our website at www.sykesAnderson.com.